Hello, my name's Neil Gregor. I'm Professor of Modern European History at the University of Southampton. And today I'm going to be talking in a series of lectures about the history of Nazi Germany. Now, my first lecture is about ideology. If we're going to understand the history of Nazi Germany, we have to start with ideology. It's not the end of any explanation, but it certainly is the beginning. The roots of Nazi Germany, or the roots of Nazi ideology, can be traced back into the 19th century. It's in the 19th century that we witness the emergence of varieties of nationalism, colonialism and imperialism, militarism, racism, anti-Semitism. They become part of the everyday common sense of broad sections of society, and they create a reservoir of thought and ideas on which Nazism can eventually draw. Now, it's important to note that there's little that's peculiarly German about this at this stage. If we go to Britain in the 19th century, we can find colonialism too, we can find nationalism. If we go to Eastern European countries, we can similarly find plenty of anti-Semitism. Now, these ideas are also at this point quite vague, they're diffuse, different elements can be put together in different ways by different people with different emphases. So it's important not to see this as kind of too fixed a story at this point. But crucial, at least in retrospect, is the emergence of a new form of anti-Semitism in the late 19th century. Traditionally, anti-Semitism had largely been based upon religion, religious intolerance. So the solution for anti-Semites was to convert to Roman Catholicism, to convert to Protestantism. The 19th century also saw the growth of what we might call liberal anti-Semitism. These people saw all religion as irrational and superstitious, and so for them the solution was just to give up religion full stop. But in the late 19th and early 20th century we see a new form of anti-Semitism emerge. It's what we think of as biological or specifically racial anti-Semitism. The animating spirit there is the set of ideas we associate with Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution. For anti-Semites who were inspired by people like Darwin, history became seen as a struggle between species, a struggle in which the strong survive and the weak go under. Increasingly, nations were imagined as bodies with individual members of the nation functioning as individual cells. And those bodies were seen as constantly under attack by their enemies, who are imagined as a disease, an illness, a plague. Now, this has two implications, really. The first is that if being Jewish is biological, rather than a question of belief or faith or culture, it can't be changed. A Jew can't give up being a Jew if Jewishness is determined biologically, any more than a horse can stop being a horse and become a fox. The second implication is very chilling indeed. If the national body is weakened by a disease, then it can only be revived, it can only be cured, if that disease is eradicated. If we can get our heads firmly around that central metaphor, the idea that emerges on the right, that the nation is a body, then we're well on the way to understanding what eventually happened in Nazi Germany after 1933. Now, after 1918, Hitler, who enters the story as an unknown army veteran, picks up on these broad ideas to make sense of what has happened to Germany during the First World War, to explain to himself why it is that Germany has been defeated. War, in Hitler's view of history, is inevitable. War reflects the laws of racial struggle. So, in Hitler's view, Germany has been defeated in 1918 because the national body, as he thinks of it, has gone into battle weakened by an illness or a disease that has been undermining the health of Germany from within. Now that disease, of course, is the Jews and their front organisation, socialism and or Marxism. which in his view spreads pacifism, internationalism, and undermines the Germans' willingness to fight. It's the disease of socialism and Marxism, as he sees it, that spreads and culminates in the revolution of 1918 to 1919. Just as Germany is about to triumph on the field, these unpatriotic revolutionaries foist their dirty deed upon an unsuspecting Germany. They sign the armistice, they foist an alien republic onto Germany, they sign the Treaty of Versailles, they deliver a collapsed Germany up to her enemies. Now, it's important to emphasise, of course, that this is a wholly spurious account of the war and revolution. The revolution was a consequence of Germany's defeat in the First World War. It was not the cause. But what matters here, first of all, is that Hitler believes it. And what matters, secondly, is that it chimes with what many other people in Germany believe too. So it's that central belief that the Weimar Republic reflects the triumph of Germany's national enemies, behind whom stand the Jews, that determines Hitler's politics in the 1920s and 1930s. National revival demands overcoming the Republic, overcoming Versailles, making Germany great again, and dealing with this internal enemy, the Jew himself. It also, of course, has longer-term implications. If Germany is going to go to war again, it must make sure that the same thing doesn't happen. If the national body is going to go to war and withstand the pressures of a new war, it can't go into a war weakened internally by the same disease. In other words, preparing for another war, sustaining another war, means eradicating the Jews. Now, quite what that means in practice is not entirely clear, and of course historians have argued over that. But the central metaphor of the diseased national body and the need to cure it contains an implied logic that we need to recognise. If we can understand that, we are well on the way to beginning to understand how the history of Nazi Germany unfolds.